Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We're Baltimore Positive. Find us at baltimorepositive.com. Set a place on the dial, whether you're out in podcast landia. Ran into a guy on Sunday night in York, Pennsylvania, who on the Eastern Shore heard my Todd Rundgren interview and had never heard of me or Baltimore Positive or Luke, wasn't even a sports fan, and ran into me on the streets of York, Pennsylvania and said, "Hey, you're the long-haired radio guy that interviewed Rundgren." So the Todd Rundgren interview is still up there, even though the concert was Sunday night. We will continue to. I had Zeke Cohen on this week talking about Baltimore City Council. Luke and I were together with Leonard Raskin and Brett Steele and a whole bunch of friends. My dearest friend John Keller was in for my birthday this weekend at Pizza John's. So you'll be hearing those conversations. A lot of Oriole conversations there, a lot of pizza conversations, a lot of East Side of Baltimore conversations, but certainly no conversation more valuable than Baltimore greater than Washington. We don't get that opportunity very often. Luke, we'll go through the fans. We'll go through the price of the tickets. We'll go through, your view from the Kevin Byrne Hobbit press box in the corner and the fans coming in. And really, from television, it was a weird sounding game because it did sound like there were 20 or 30,000 of them and 20 or 30,000 of us. But all that being said, the defense and how they performed against this best-in-class rookie, who doesn't have all the tools, and certainly they don't have the defense, but that was more impressive than any burgundy and gold team that I have seen rummage in here or around here at any point. Maybe Shanahan had it going for 5 minutes. Joe Gibbs had it going for 30 seconds, over the course of the last 30 years. But the body of work from when Kevin Eck and I went down to the stadium in 97 and Ray Lewis stole the game and it's a brand new thing. And I tell you what, 30 years later, the fact that we've been their daddies in the marketplace for all of this time, and you get together and they bring this kid up here, knowing that the defense is sort of the shaky part of the operation here, that if the Ravens were going to lose, it was going to be because of their defense, not because of what their offense didn't do. Game was close enough, and that kid looked capable of winning a game, and he's going to win a lot of games. And 4 years from now, I will measure this. 4 years from now, it'll be Derrick Henry will be gone, whatever. But 4 years from now, where Lamar is and where Jaden Daniels is, and whatever the accomplishments are. And by the way, that'll be my 60th birthday, so I'll have a good measuring stick on that. These are the two bright lights in the league. Mahomes aside, but this is the great hope for the league that has really changed the way the game is played.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have someone who can make plays with his arm and with his legs, that's optimal. I mean, that's what you want. As much as there's still a place, I think, for the traditional pocket passer, if there is, that traditional pocket passer has to be really, really dynamic.
Like Joseph Vincent Flacco, who won
Sure,
another game. I just want to
sure.
point that out.
Oh,
As I
hey,
get older, I appreciate older people.
Joe continues to be a great story, but he would be the first to tell you that when you see guys like Lamar or Jaden Daniels or throw Josh Allen into that mix, heck, even Joe Burrow, who we don't think is mobile, he ran for a touchdown on Sunday night. But I mean, to get back to Jaden Daniels, I mean, this kid's dynamic, and anyone who saw him play in college and win a Heisman last year and what he did at LSU, you knew that this had a chance to really translate to the next level. And he's playing at a very high level. And I think this is where we look at what the Ravens were able to do defensively to make things more difficult for him. For starters, I think one of the, I don't want to say understated parts of the game, because I think everyone talked about it and it was acknowledged even during the game. Losing Brian Robinson was a big loss for that Washington offense. He's their best running back. He is someone who's able to create some yards after the carry and make people miss and get some yardage. And that's not to say that Robinson was going to run for 100 yards against this Ravens defense. I mean, this Ravens, say what you want about the Ravens D, but their run defense has been elite. Their run defense has been as good as it's been at any point in recent years. So that hasn't been an issue. But would Brian Robinson have added a little bit of an element to their running game that would have maybe taken some of the pressure off of Jaden Daniels? Sure. But I think what the Ravens defense did well was they did a nice job of keeping Daniels hemmed in. He did not really bust out. He had what, a 9-yard run at one point in time where he ran for a first down, but I mean, he finished with 22 rushing yards. I mean, this is the kind of kid like Lamar Jackson who, if he gets loose, he can run and take it to the house. I mean, he's got that kind of ability. I don't know if he's quite as fast as Lamar, but he's pretty darn fast. So you have that. So what they were able to do, and I'm not shocked by this, and this is still where you do credit the defense, they were able to make Washington extremely one-dimensional. Now, to your point, Jaden Daniels did a heck of a job with their offense being one-dimensional. In fact, I thought there were a few different points in the second half where I kind of felt Washington did him a disservice even trying to run it on first down after a while because it just put them in second and long. I think it got to the point where you just said you can't run it, so why are you even trying? Give Jaden Daniels an extra down to try to pick it up with his arms. So and he made some great throws. Certainly be remiss as much as you might look at that Washington offense and say, okay, they still need to put more around him. Terry McLaurin's great. And Terry McLaurin's been great for a long time. It's just he's been saddled with not so good quarterbacks, but he's been able to play for a long time. And I think anyone who's watched that team knew that. But now it's a case of he's got the quarterback that can maximize what he can do. So I think from Lamar Jackson to even Roquan Smith, and Roquan's not someone who pays lip service to quarterbacks, right? He's not just going to compliment the opposing offense just for the heck of it. Roquan's a little more old school in that way. Roquan was very complimentary of Daniels after the game, and I think you saw that he made plays. I think the Ravens did a good enough job. I'm not saying good overall. That the pass defense needs to continue to get better. Still too many big plays, but I think they did a better job in not letting the ball thrown over their head for a 70-yard play, which, hey, Daniels, go back to that Monday night game against Cincinnati. Remember a couple of those deep touchdowns that he threw. He can throw a deep ball as well as anyone in the league, even as a rookie. So they were able to mitigate that factor. And I do think there's something to be said that they made things difficult for them. And, at times, even when it was driving to kick a field goal or score a touchdown, they made them work for it. They had to convert third downs and all of that. So, that's a low bar. I get that. That's almost like I'm damning them with praise a little bit in saying that. But at the same time, when you have an offense that's humming the way the Ravens offense is humming right now, frankly, you don't need your defense to be great. They just get a couple stops here and there, and they were able to do that. They were able to hold Washington to 3 at a couple different points where it felt very critical. But I think if I'm sitting there as a Washington fan, as much as I would never want to be that, I'm coming out of that game really encouraged by the way that Daniels played on the road. Again,
well,
we can
didn't
debate.
flinch. I mean, like at all. I mean,
yeah.
And the fact that early in the game, a second quarter when things were still very much in the balance, he's getting up into the huddle with 18, 19 seconds left to go, up onto the line I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ravens are making their moves, and he's watching the clock, and he steps back out of center. He's adjusting the line. I'm thinking to myself, Lamar had a hard time doing that a year or two ago, right? And to this point, it took Monken and the offense. He works like a veteran. And from a visual standpoint, and the sort of unflappability of he just doesn't look big for him. And that kind of frightens me as the Baltimore-Washington balance is here, because I'd hate for them to win 3 Super Bowls over the next 10 years and us to not win any. Like, I've been there. I've been there. Used to go to we talked about all these Capitol Center shows. You know how many Capitol Center shows I went where somebody had a Theismann or a Riggins jersey on and saying, we won, and I'm in Baltimore saying, I don't even want to see him on TV. So there has been a point where you don't get my Baltimore up too much, where I'm saying Joe Flacco and all the stuff that Scott Van Pelt fakes the accent. I have the real one. I can bring Gina Shock in, drop the mic on all y'all. But I would say this for the DC thing, the rivalry part of it, if you don't like Washington and you're old school like me, I don't know. It looks like they got their guy for the next 3 to 6 years from now, where Lamar is 6 years into this. I'm frightened about where that kid's going to be 6 years from now. So should the Cowboys and the Giants and the Eagles, teams in that division, because it does feel like he's going to be there, and I'm shocked by that. By any rookie that can come in and do this, right? We've been watching this. Show me any rookie 6 weeks into this that looked like he knew what he was doing. Mahomes,
Yeah.
maybe? I mean, in the last 20 years, tell me any, not even Lamar. Forget
Well,
Lamar was green. He was the 32nd player taken in the draft. I'm talking about 1-1s. Joe Burrow, these guys that, Trevor Lawrence, 3 coaches in, can't figure it out. Sam Darnold's on another team, doing pretty good right now. But to do it 6 weeks in with a lost franchise, without a lot of weapons, I'll give you McLaurin. I'll give you, he played without his running back on Sunday, so he could even say, we didn't get a full punch at them. We almost beat them.
yeah, I mean, it's really impressive. I mean, you mentioned Patrick Mahomes sat his first year. I mean, Alex Smith was still the guy
That's
there.
right.
So, I mean, for one, I mean, it's rare territory where a 1-1 is just handed the job week one. He earned that. I think. I mean, I wasn't watching Washington with bated breath during training camp in the preseason by any stretch, but he did
Is
enough
Colt
for.
McCoy still their backup?
Yeah, it feels like it, right? It
I
feels
don't
like
know.
Marcus
Honestly, dude, for them
Marcus
being
Mariota.
35 miles apart, I don't pay any attention to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well,
like they haven't existed in
well,
20 years. I
you just
can't
said
hate
it.
them. I mean,
You nothing them, right? I mean that they've been irrelevant. I mean the only thing that Washington was really notable for over the last 20 years was Dan Snyder making an ass of himself.
correct.
I mean seriously.
He was the brand. He
Yeah.
was the brand.
So
Yeah.
so so that's where this is so notable. And let's be clear. I'll give a nod to RG3 with what that phenomena was until late in his rookie year when he got hurt against the Ravens, and that
Yeah, I
was the
was
beginning
there.
of
I,
the end.
I, I
I
was
mean,
there
that
when
was a
Haloti Ngata
phenomena.
caught him. Yeah.
That was a phenomena. I mean, that really was. And I think, again, this is where, we always get caught up in the moment. And that's where, as we were talking about the Ravens offense, we've seen the Ravens offense look extremely dynamic in recent years. But with Jaden Daniels, it feels like, man, this feels like it could be special for them. And you just said it. The good news is he's not in the AFC, right? So you talk about that. But in terms of just local bragging rights, I mean, Washington for all the hoopla and cachet that they earned in the 80s and the early 90s with Joe Gibbs and even the Mark Rippon Super Bowl, they've been completely irrelevant since then. I mean, you could probably sit there and try to remember the playoff appearances. There aren't that many of them over the last 30 years for them. So for him to come in and look the way that he's looked, and they have a ways to go, there's no doubt about it. I mean, their defense isn't good enough. I mean, that was obvious when you saw Zay Flowers have a career day as a receiver in the first half on Sunday. But this Jaden Daniels just is really talented, really looks the part, isn't rattled. To your point, and I say this with no disrespect to Lamar Jackson or any other quarterback that became a phenomenon really quickly. I mean, this kid's doing it at such a rapid level, his command of the offense and what he's doing. And again, that's why Sunday Brian Robinson not being there was big for him. They've leaned on their running game a lot. I think it's fair to point that out. It's not like they're just asking Daniels to throw it 50 times. There are so few quarterbacks who can do that. I mean, Kansas City has looked better since they've had Isaiah Pacheco become their guy the last couple years, and that's eased the load on Patrick Mahomes a little bit. So that having some help is not something that a quarterback should apologize for. But you're seeing Daniels do things as a rookie, less than 2 months into his career, where you do say, wow, it looks like that already. What's it going to look like in November and December? What's it going to look like in year two, let alone year 5 or 6? So, man, the one thing that Washington and Commanders fans, a new ownership there, I mean, they're absolutely in the business. They can sell hope with that kid. I mean, there's no question about that. So he was impressive. Again, I think the Ravens did a good enough job of making things difficult that they had to earn it. There weren't that Cincinnati game last week. I mean, at one, Jamar Chase catches an underneath pass and goes 70 yards for the touchdown. I mean, there weren't any plays like that at the very least. So it was nice to see them clean things up. There was a high degree of difficulty on some of those plays. I mean, some of those plays, I mean, Brandon Stevens was right there on McLaurin and he just makes catches, right? I mean, he just makes plays. At times, you do have to tip your cap. I mean, the perfect defense can be called. You can be in right position, and you remember the other guy tries too. So, really impressed with Daniels. If I were a Washington fan, I'd feel more excited and heartened by what I saw out of him in that environment. It wasn't 70,000 Ravens fans to your point. We'll get into any of that, but it was an electric atmosphere. It was exciting. There was definitely, I got to the stadium at 9 o'clock, and you can always sense, as you're driving to the lot, whether there's a buzz in the air, and there was a buzz in the air. I mean, that was, whether it was more Washington fans, but Ravens fans too. There was excitement knowing that it was Lamar against this young kid, Jaden Daniels, who looks like he could be the next phenom in that group, of that top 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks in the league sooner than later. And he lived up to that, even with his defense not doing much to help him out, even with the running game being a non-factor, even the Ravens, their ability to hem him up and not let Daniels get out and run himself. I think, they did a good job with that. But even with that, he made plays and they had a chance. I mean, Washington at the end of the day, they just couldn't get a stop when they needed to. I mean, the Ravens scored on 5 straight possessions, and then the final possession, they were in victory formation. If Jaden Daniels gets one stop after that, when the Ravens went 3 and out, if gets one stop from his defense at any point after that, might be talking about a different game. We might be talking about overtime.
Well, they play 4 quarters without their running back too, so we have to continue to bring that up and to say, like, if the Ravens have to go down to Tampa and play without Derrick Henry Monday night because he's got the flu, they're a different team. They really are. Story, they're a completely different team.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't win, but it makes things more difficult. Newsflash. You want your best players to be healthy and available, right? I mean, it's not a difficult concept. So for Jaden Daniels to be without Robinson and to not have the robust running game, which, look, even with Robinson, Commanders weren't going to run for 150 yards against the Ravens defense. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone's doing that this year. I mean, that's how good the Ravens run defense has been. So for him to be in a position where their offense was made very one-dimensional and to still do what they did and have a chance in the fourth quarter, again, that says something for a rookie quarterback. And that's why Lamar, Derrick Henry, Roquan Smith, John Harbaugh, in the postgame, they were all saying, hey, Jaden's really good. I mean, give that kid a lot of credit. And I think the defense, as much as we'll point to the defense needing to be better and certainly needing to be better against the pass, I think you still chalk it up to that's a rookie quarterback that's not playing like a rookie through 6 weeks. And, as far as the local rivalry or whatever, it's not a rivalry, but local series, let's call it, every 4 years, certainly looks like it could be more interesting the next time these teams cross paths. That's for sure.
If you're watching out on our video stream, Luke Jones has his new birthday gift, the Pizza John's hat. We were at Pizza John's on Friday celebrating the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. Powering Luke up, getting him out to practice all week long. Practice will be a little weird this week. Tampa on Monday night. I have no idea the situation down there in the league and where they've been sort of sequestered off winning football games and battering other teams. So a big week ahead all the way around. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour is going to get back out on the road. I'm putting dates together. We're going to be at Mama's on the Half Shell. We're going to be, I was at Coco's on Friday night having crab cakes. We're getting down to Costas again for sure. Cooper's North, we're going to be back up there next month as well, doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by our friends at Curio Wellness. I'm wearing a shirt, as well as Liberty Pure Solutions as we get the Oyster Tour out and about. I want to talk about Roquan Smith. I want to talk about the defense. To your point, they didn't have the running attack. The Commanders didn't. But passes were open all day. Getting receivers open in this defense has not been difficult, with or without Dean Pease, with or without Zach Orr. I'm beginning to question the players a little bit as much as the scheme, and just saying one-on-one when you can't keep pace with Zach Ertz. Who's not Travis Kelce, who used to be, but isn't anymore. Yeah. I think the defense, when they lose games this year, and we talk about the 2 losses earlier, I mean, they blew 2 touchdown leads, right? So, and they've done a lot of that around here of late in allowing teams to sort of hang around. The Commanders could have won the game. I mean, that's a fumble away, a drop ball, a blah, 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 something bad happening, bad snap, right? Linderbaum leaves the ball on the ground and they fell on it. But the game was close, and the game is close because it's sort of like Fenway Park. This defense is never going to end the game. You know what I mean? Like the game's not going to be over in the seventh inning if you're down 10 points because we've seen this team fold up big leads in the end. And all the vital statistics are there to say you can pass against this team, and they're susceptible to big plays if they can't get to the quarterback. Not running the ball, but throwing the ball. This is not a great back seven for that.
No, it hasn't been. And I think what's been surprising is I think there was the optimism that it was going to be. I
Well, they've
think
spent a lot of money and time on it, right?
sure, sure. And look, that's not to say that it's all bad by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I think last week aside, I think Marlon Humphreys had a better year than he had had the last couple of years. I think Kyle Hamilton, after a bad week one for his standards, I think Kyle Hamilton's played much better. It's not as though they're completely bad across the board, but I think where we've really seen it show up, and you mentioned with Zach Ertz, who is certainly not the player he was in Philadelphia, although he's still a really nice piece for a rookie quarterback to have. But it continues to be that middle intermediate portion of the field. And whether we're talking about Roquan Smith, maybe not looking as certainly not elite in coverage, I'm not necessarily saying Roquan was elite in coverage the last couple of years, but was certainly much better in coverage than what we've seen to this point. Now, how much of that is him? Is he dealing with some kind of ailment that's making him a little bit slower? Is it just he's a year older? Is it something in the scheme that's asking him to do a little bit too much coverage wise? Is he missing Patrick Queen next to him? As much as we talked about that, Patrick Queen benefiting from Roquan Smith, let's also acknowledge Patrick Queen's a good player. And so Roquan Smith would benefit from him depending on certain things they're trying to do. So now you have a less experienced inside linebacker next to him. They played more dime as a result, where they take Simpson off the field. But is that
I would say that
bit...
Queen Roquan thing is pretty special that we didn't really
sure
know that until you don't know what you got till it's gone in that way. Because Patrick Queen was always not good enough. Not Ray Lewis, not C.J. Mosley. Struggled a little bit until Roquan came. Then when Roquan came, he looked like an all-pro player. I'm not sophisticated enough on a down-by-down basis, but they're lacking something 6 weeks into this. And we could talk how great they are, and they're 4-2, and they're going to win the Super Bowl and all. But at some point, they're going to have to go out and defend Patrick Mahomes in a big game.
Yeah, sure. No question about it. And I think that's where we look at what happened with this Ravens defense in the offseason. Mike McDonald, right? And Denard Wilson, Anthony Weaver on the coaching side. So then personnel-wise, Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, Jadeveon Clowney, although, certainly Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe and Travis Jones and Nnamdi Madubuike collectively, still have them, in decent shape with their pass rush. And even Ngakoue, as back in the mix and has contributed the last couple of weeks. So, but you talk about the players that they lost, and look, I'm not at all suggesting the Ravens should have ponied up the money to keep Patrick Queen, or that they were going to pay the money to keep Geno Stone, or go down give Clowney the 2-year deal that Carolina gave him. And I'll say this, go look at how those players are performing with their new teams by looking at it from a 30,000-foot look and Pro Football Focus grades and things of that nature. It hasn't been much to write home about. It's not as though those players have been shining stars with their new teams necessarily. But as I always say, just because you acknowledge a player is going to be at a price point that you can't justify paying, and you're making the smart business and caps decision, that doesn't mean you're not going to miss that player. And I think certainly when you look at whether it's Patrick Queen or talking about Geno Stone, who has not been great for the Bengals, but Geno Stone was a really great fit for what the Ravens asked him to do on the back end of the defense when they went into 3 safety looks, allowing them to move Hamilton closer to the line of scrimmage. they've had their growing pains in replacing some of those guys. So I think that they're still in a position where they're searching for that. So I mentioned Roquan Smith. Look, their safety play beyond Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams has not had a good year. And I think Eddie Jackson's been very underwhelming to the point where, again, go back and look at the second half of Sunday's game. It, I don't want to go as far as to say he was benched, but we were seeing our Darius Washington lining up as a two deep safety in the second half. I thought that was interesting to see. So maybe there's a change there. Maybe Washington kind of just becomes that guy there, but they need better safety play because that again, we've been talking about it since week 1 and week 2. I mean, the Raiders were able to exploit that intermediate middle portion of the field, and that's how they got back in the game. They had Brock Bowers and some of their other guys that were getting free at that part of the field. How much of that is the linebackers not getting enough depth and coverage, and how much of that is our safeties not coming up quickly enough to converge on someone in that portion of the field? It's off, right? It's not optimized. It's certainly not calibrated the way that it needs to be. So that remains a work in progress. And I'm with you. Look, the Ravens are in a position after years and years and years and years, going all the way back to the 2000 team, the 99 team, where they were so accustomed to just having the defense lead the way. And we know that that's obviously shifted in recent years with Lamar Jackson, but it's truer than ever now with how their offense is playing and the offense leading the way and the defense, albeit really stout and really good and stingy against the run. It's been bad against the pass. It has not been good enough. So they've got to figure that out. You don't need to be the number one defense in football to win the Super Bowl. And that was a point guys like me were trying to argue about for years and years and years as they pumped resources into the defense and at times didn't do a whole lot with their offense, specifically post Super Bowl Joe Flacco era with their offense. But you still need to be able to stop the pass and not allow a team to just go down the field at will against you. And, we've seen too much of that. And if nothing else, even if statistically, if they're not going to be a top 5 or top 10 pass defense, they've got to figure out a way to be a little more dynamic. One thing that's really dried up, and you actually mentioned this in a previous segment, takeaways. They need to start capitalizing on some of these situations where a ball has hit a defensive back in the hands. That's happened a few times here in recent weeks, multiple times in recent weeks. You can give up yardage. You can even give up points. But if you can steal a possession here or there when it comes to taking the football away, assuming your offense isn't giving the ball away and this offense, interception aside and the near turnover aside with the Linderbaum weird snap, those examples aside, they've done a good job protecting the football, offensively. If they can get more dynamic in terms of taking the ball away a little bit more, making a few more splash plays, those high variance plays that really matter.
This is why I say Geno Stone.
Yeah, right.
Well, they're not getting. They're having balls hit them in the chest, but they're not in general competing for thrown balls. In a general sense, Zach Ertz is standing out there in pasture catching the ball, and a lot of times, the good offenses, it's catch and run. Or it's McLaurin making incredible catches, but uncontested catches, I would say. Uncontested catches
been too many of those.
are bigger this year than they've been at any 6-week point that I've seen recently because they're not competing in pass coverage right now. And part of that is thinking they're going to get to the quarterback and pass rush too.
Sure, and that's been hot or cold. At times the pass rush has been really good, and other times you kind of see it vanish, right?
When you have a running quarterback, it vanishes real quick.
Well, sure. And again, I also would say, and this is where I'll compliment them, they did a good job in keeping him in the pocket, right? Jaden Daniels had 22 rushing yards. Knowing that Brian Robinson wasn't going to play, that they were in a position where if Washington was going to have big yardage on the ground, it was probably going to be Daniels doing it because Austin Eckler's more of the receiving type, more so than running between the tackles. So again, I want to credit them on that. I don't think it was a bad all across the board kind of performance, but it's certainly they still need to get better in that front. And again, they need to be a little more dynamic in terms of forcing a few more turnovers. But to your point, you've got to get your hands on footballs more frequently to do that. And there've just been too many. There weren't the 40, 50, 60-yard chunk plays that Cincinnati was making against them the previous week. But there were still, I think it was 4 completions of 20 plus yards in that game for Washington. That's still too many for the high standard that is a Ravens pass defense, and a Ravens defense in general. So, they've got work to do. There's no question about that. I mean, the fact that they brought in Dean Pease this past week as a senior advisor, and I even said to you, and I don't say this to be flippant about it, but I kind of said the fact that they did this 5 weeks into the season, that kind of raised my concern level, because that tells me they recognize there's something here that's not right. And
that's an alarm. That's a big red flag. Yeah.
And it's not just Zach Orr. Let me be very clear about that. He's a first-year coordinator. I still think Zach Orr, before it's all said and done, is going to be a good coordinator. But guys have growing pains. Mike Macdonald, who's a head coach now, and by the way, the Seahawks, after a strong start, they've kind of gone the other way. I mean,
it would have helped Zach Orr to go to Notre Dame and be the defensive coordinator for 2 years and come back,
sure,
right? And that's where the Mike Macdonald thing, he went and coached with Jim. Yeah. And by the way, I hope Jim's okay. I mean, I'm a lot closer with Jim than I am with John, as you've noticed over the course of time. But having that, there's no substitute for doing it. And you could say you sat on the sidelines, you've been a player, all that. Roquan Smith's a player. Ray Lewis a player. I don't know if he's going to go out and call defenses this week for the Ravens. It's right. A different. I remember 30 years ago here when the old farts down at the 4100 Club would call, "Hey, Nasty, John Unitas should be the offensive coordinator. What is this? What has Matt Cavanaugh ever done? Johnny he knows offense." It's not really that way. And I think Zach Orr can know a lot. We talk about Harbaugh being overwhelmed in 20 years, although he's one of the top 10 coaches of all time, by the way, the broadcast, I tell you what, tell Chad Steele I'm pissed for making me watch it on TV. It was terrible. Nance and Romo are terrible. Like, they have lost it. Like, whatever the fastball is, whatever the study is, Romo's become an ass kisser. Like, in the beginning, he was the former player that was into the game and predictive of everything and all that. All that energy's gone. Like, they're not an A team. I'm being honest with you. I watch a lot of football. I watch too much football now. I don't get to watch it in person anymore. So it was subpar. It really was. And by the way, congratulations to Kenny Albert, my partner for number 500. I want to throw that in there on a birthday week where we're celebrating birthdays and pizza and oysters and all sorts of stuff. I want to make sure my people get their run. But yeah, not good. And I would say from Zach Orr's perspective, 6 weeks in, it has been an education. And I think I don't think it's embarrassing for him to bring Dean Pease in. They made it sound like, and again, what they make it sound like and what it is, I've dealt with that. I know how disingenuous they all are. But in this case, it made it sound like Zach said, "Let's call Dean," or John said, "Let's find a solution," or, "Hey, we need another body in here." I don't know what Dean Pease is doing on a daily basis. I know when he was there, he was the man, and kind of a cranky old man even 10 years ago in regard to my way or the highway. He had a little bit of that going on. And I don't know, that probably came from Belichick, the godfather of Deflategate too. I didn't point that out last week, but I should have. I don't know. That's an admission, and I would agree that is all of them saying we want to get better, and I love that, and they probably will get better.
And let me be clear, I'm not being critical that I dislike it or I'm against that move, but I think it is a very clear admission of we need a little bit of help here, and that doesn't mean Zach Orr's incapable. Let's be clear. I don't think this is at all Dean Pease is coming in and as the secret defensive coordinator and is calling. No, but it is an experienced set of eyes and an experienced voice and an experienced mind. And I'll say this much, and we talked about this. We talked about this when Zach Orr was hired to replace Mike Macdonald. We acknowledged the fact that he did not have that apprenticeship in the way that Mike Macdonald did. And I even thought at that point in time, now I'm not going to sit here and say that I mentioned Dean Pease specifically, but I thought at that point in time that perhaps it would serve Orr well to add someone to the coaching staff who had some defensive coordinator experience at some point in his career. So from that standpoint, had the Ravens added Pease as a senior advisor in June or July or even in the month of August, I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelash then. I think people would have said, "Hey, it sounds like a smart move." Dean Pease is 75 now. He's out of the coordinator game, but he still has something to contribute, and he loves ball. He can't get away from it. I mean, the guy's retired 4 times and has come back, so he's a lifer as it pertains to that.
By the way, I
So
saw
it's
Mike Zimmer on the sidelines in Dallas, and I'm thinking, dude's got $100 million and still has to do it.
and is
Marvin.
just
I went to
and is
dinner with
getting
Marvin.
walloped.
Marvin's in Baltimore, staying at the Four Seasons, running around with the Raiders, knowing they can't win the Super Bowl,
Yeah,
and like getting paid money he's never going to spend. His family's never going to spend because it's that much money. And it's like, man, dude, I don't know. I'm sorry you don't have a hobby. Billick
yeah,
figured out golf finally at 70. Billick started playing golf, but these guys that are lifers, I say that to people all the time. Like, if I didn't do this every day, I'm 56 years old today, what would I do? It's all I've been doing for all my life for 40 years. Despite what Chad Steele and Greg Bader might think of me, this is what I do. And I don't know that I'm going to do anything else. And I would think from football at 56 versus 76, I don't know. I'm not going to play golf when I'm 76. So I admire these lifer
sure,
people that have such institutional knowledge that they can bring it back. And probably, not probably, definitely. If you're down in New Orleans covering the Super Bowl and I'm watching on TV and waving to you and they win the Super Bowl, they'll probably point to this as a chapter in the book. Dean Pease coming back and Zach Orr and their relationship and all of that and how it all really went down. And I'm sure DeCosta and I will be getting coffee together at the end of the season when I'm writing Purple Rain 3. But in all sincerity, that was the goal here is like, who's available? Who can we get? Uncle Steve has an unlimited amount of money, so we can spend money
yeah,
on coaches. I mean, that's one thing they can't do right now is bring in another safety. They just can't. Not a from a financial standpoint. I'm talking about that coaching is the one thing where you can have as much of it as you want, and it's proof positive that they want to win out there. I'm okay with Dean Pease being here.
yeah. And again, I never suggested that I dislike the move or I was opposed to it or anything like that. But it does raise a red flag. It does draw some attention to, hey, we're missing something here, and it doesn't mean our defense coordinator stinks. Doesn't mean our defense is beyond repair. But hey, here's someone who has a relationship with our new defensive coordinator, was his first defensive coordinator, his only defensive coordinator as a player. He was the first guy who was still in charge here when Zach Orr transitioned into coaching. He's kept in touch with him. I mean, Zach Orr mentioned Dean Pease as one of his mentors when he was introduced as defensive coordinator back in February. So it wasn't shocking in terms of, well, being able to connect the dots, but just the timing of it. Again, in hindsight, this is probably an admission that the Ravens should have brought someone like Dean Pease onto the staff from the moment they hired Zach Orr, right? Just to be a sounding board, to be someone who has some experience to help him scrimmage through some of these things. Is it a during the week game planning issue, or is it a bullets flying in real time during the game kind of issue that they're trying to, or is it a little bit of both, or is it just, hey, we have our safeties not playing at a very high level other than Hamilton. Our two deep safeties, Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson, are not playing very well. Our inside linebackers maybe aren't getting enough depth and coverage or are struggling to hang with certain guys here or there. Is there something we can do scheme wise to clean this up, calm this down, make this less of a liability? And you have someone who has all this knowledge who maybe can help do that. I don't think this isn't Dean Pease coming in to save the day. This is Dean Pease coming in to lend a hand, lend a voice, be a sounding board. So, we'll see what this looks like in the coming weeks. To your point, if the Ravens are in New Orleans in February, I don't think it's going to be that, everyone points to Dean Pease as saving the season. No, not anything like that. But it could be something that helps. It could absolutely be something where you look back and say, hey, that really, he provided this for Zach Orr, or he provided this for the secondary, or he provided this from a linebacker standpoint, in terms of, dropping into coverage or certain elements. Because, Dean Pease coached Ray Lewis, he's an inside linebackers coach when he first arrived in Baltimore. So, we'll see how it plays out. And like I said, I thought the defense did some good things on Sunday that, at least were better than what we saw in Cincinnati. But yeah, they still have a ways to go. But I'll also point out, in the same way that I acknowledged that this Ravens offense hasn't exactly gone up against a murderer's row of defenses statistically. I mean, that Raiders defense is bad. Dallas is awful. Uh, I mean, Washington, not a good defense. Cincinnati, bad defense. So, you go through the list. Eh, on the flip side, in fairness and in defense of this defense, it has to get better, no doubt about it. But look at who they played. Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott on paper at the very least, even though Dallas is completely lost at this point. Josh Allen, uh, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels. Yes, I'm going to put him into that category, into that discussion.
Everybody else will.
So this past defense has gone up against some really tough opponents early in the season. That's not an excuse. It has
Baker
to get
Mayfield
better.
around the corner too.
Yeah,
It's not going to get easier.
It has to get better. But on the flip side, they have gone up against some really good offenses. So, in a big picture sense, what I'm saying here is I don't think they're the worst in the league stopping the pass. I think when it comes down to it right now, from a true talent level and a true performance level, it's probably closer to, somewhere in that average, below average range rather than dead last or 31st. But to your point, Baker Mayfield is, that's the next challenge. And they're going to be facing Joe Burrow again. And they're going to have others that they play later in the season that are going to be more of a challenge. So, every week there's a new challenge. Every week there's a new opponent that's trying to hurt your feelings. So
Nice, you got a bye week later in the month too in Cleveland. 27th, we get a bye.
Boy,
Right?
oh, they're so bad. So bad. I mean, what a disaster. What a disaster as our old friend Joe Flacco is winning games for, albeit the Indianapolis Colts, but winning games while Deshaun Watson is arguably the
He
worst
looks
quarterback in
better in that
football.
Colts jersey than he's looked in any jersey, including ours. And maybe that's the beauty of my childhood and Burt Jones, but that white top,
Yeah.
he
It's just that's why we hate it so much though, but it's a good looking uniform. I mean, it is. That's why my
it's stolen. It's still stolen.
it is, and that's why my generation's bitter. I mean, not bitter, but dislike has the disdain because we saw all the old photos and old video
There
and
it
all,
is.
you know, there you
Yeah,
go.
right. Yeah, yeah,
There you go. But
yeah.
that's a clean look. It is. So, but boy, going back to Cleveland, they're they're awful. I mean, even their defense has fallen off substantially, but it all begins with the quarterback. If you have a franchise quarterback who stinks and you're paying them that much money, nothing else is going to matter. I mean, it's really not. I mean, they're done. They're done. I mean, we can talk about the Bengals or other
$78
teams.
million cap hit next year. So it's
It's a
outrageous,
disaster.
right?
It's a disaster. I
Yeah.
mean, we use disasters used too much in sports, and obviously we're talking relative. It's sports at the end of the day. We're
Well,
not
that
talking
day
about
that Chad took my press pass and wouldn't let me get to Bishotti called it the disaster out on the back lawn 2 years ago at the Breakers, right? Like for all of them, these guaranteed contracts with this guy, like we've talked about it for years. We'll have a whole week to talk about it 2 weeks from now. Luke Jones is here. He's Baltimore Luke. I am Nestor. You can find him out on the internet. We have birthday week. We have an incredible celebration this week for the life of one of the godfathers of WNST, Phil Jackman. If you are too young to know who Phil Jackman was, I will be glad to introduce him to you on Tuesday and Wednesday. I have found some old tapes of Phil and I, and I'll talk more about Phil later in the week with somebody who knows Phil and a bit curmudgeonly, faux curmudgeonly, as I would say. But 21 years ago, it was 4 days before I met my wife. It was February 4th, 2003. He came in, and I think it was a period of time where he had just left the paper. And, I owned the stations 21 years ago. This is before Drew Forrester was on my airwaves. Bob Haney was here. It's way before Rob Long, way before Luke Jones, like a long time ago, 21 years ago, that Phil had done a lot of radio with WBAL and was looking for something to do. And Phil hated my show. Like he was the TV repairman that he loved me too much to be mean to me in the paper, but he would have been really mean to me in the paper had he had that opportunity. And I brought him in. He was actually not. It was like kayfabe. It was like real Phil. It wasn't like the Phil character that beats Nestor up. So we did like 2.5 hours of his life story, talking about covering Ali, all the deep thoughts on Earl Weaver. He covered Yastrzemski during the Impossible Dream season for the Springfield paper. So Phil Jackman led a beautiful life. He had beautiful daughters, beautiful grandchildren. His wife sold every house, Tina, every house I ever bought and sold. Just a beautiful family and a beautiful life. He died at the age of 87 this week after battling dementia in recent years. But on Sunday morning, I sat here for about 3 hours and listened to Phil's voice. Phil will be alive on Tuesday, and you will hear some great, great stories from a great man and a real father figure to everything I've ever done here, beginning in 1985 when I met Phil Jackman. So you'll hear that on Tuesday and Wednesday in large stretches. And if you don't like it, get on our WNST text service in case something happens. 410-821-9678. We'll be promoting that. Text join. By the way, everybody that was ever kicked off of our text service because they were on T-Mobile or some AT&T or some I'm trying to think of Cellular One. I'm trying to think of the companies that are gone, that didn't roll over. You're back on the text service now. It's about 6,000 of you getting all of Luke's text. All of that brought to you by Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy. I would hold my Cole Roofing mug up, but I broke it, and Bill Cole still owes me one, and I haven't talked to him in a month. All my friends are leaving me since the Orioles lost. I am Nestor. He is Luke. We got plenty of football ahead. It's a big week around here. It's birthday week. All are brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'll have Maryland Lottery Raven scratch-offs to give away when we kick off the Crab Cake Tour. Probably next week. Might be week after that, but we're going to go nuts through the holidays. I'm not eating turkey. I'm eating oysters around here. It's the Maryland Oyster Tour. Brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions as well as Curio Wellness. I'm wearing my Roquan Smith Curio Wellness thing here. We're WNST. Back for more. Lots of football ahead. Ravens, still better than the Redskins, the Commanders, the Washington football team. Name anything they want. Baltimore, greater than Washington. Stay with us.